Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to UFO, UAP news from the internet, books, experiencers, and even the government. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Paola Harris. She is a world renowned investigative journalist who has interviewed and worked with the biggest names in ufology today. And along the way, she has researched and published several noteworthy books. The scope of her work is so vast that it can not possibly be covered in just this one podcast. So I'll be talking with Paola about her expanded edition of Trinity, the Best Kept Secret, which she co-authored with Jacques Vallée, and coincides with the blockbuster movie Oppenheimer, which has several similarities. Takes place during the same time period, same location, and it covers the consequences of the same event, the first atomic bomb ever exploded in American soil. Hello, Paola. How are you? It's an honor to have you on UFO Disclosure. Thank you so much for being a guest.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. This is a pleasure for me.
So I mentioned that the subtitle of Trinity is the best kept secret. Now, is that secret because of the UFO incident and when it happened? Because I know it happened in 1945, and Roswell, if I'm not mistaken, was 1947.
Yes, the book Trinity, and it's been out now for 2 years, is the detailed story of the Trinity test. And Jacques says it was not a test, it was a real, explosion of the bomb. And the consequences 1 month later, when two little boys, Jose Padilla, who was 9 years old, and Remy Baca, who was 7, happened to be about 13 miles away on the Padilla property and saw a controlled landing of a UFO. It hit a radio tower and spread out all kinds of what we don't know what it is on the cactus and everywhere. I mean, people call it angel hair. And then it landed. So these two little boys, curiously, were witness to a thunderstorm, which is in the movie. You can see the storms in New Mexico. In fact, there was a thunderstorm also during Roswell, and the control landing of this avocado-shaped craft. Now, I'm going to tell you that this is not an accident, in that I think the story needs to be told in this time period. And I found out about it when I was living in Italy in 1999, and I wondered why my colleagues didn't go to question the little boys. They were no longer little boys, but at least we have the witnesses, the location, and because the 9-year-old went in there on the last day and pulled a piece off the wall of the craft, we also have artifacts. And so I was wondering, why isn't anybody covering it? And ironically, just like my life is coincidences, it was supposed to be me. I did 5 years of covering it, 2013 on, and then Jacques Vallée came aboard the last 5 years. So this is 10 years of research.
That's amazing, and it's amazing how much time you spent on research and talking with the family. I know that just reading the book, I could sense that you were passionate about giving Jose and Remy a voice, 7 and 9-year-old kids that were poor, lived out in Los Alamos, and were pretty much dirt poor, and they were exposed to that first detonation that made so many people sick. And I know that the government didn't tell anybody about the after effects or even about the detonation itself. And you went out
No,
there and
they
you
said,
actually spoke to these people.
yeah, oh my goodness. I mean, so many of Remy and Jose's family died of leukemia. Well, they couldn't. If you watch the movie, Oppenheimer was so top secret. In fact, they crucified Oppenheimer in the end because they thought he was a spy, and it was so top secret that they didn't know what they were unleashing. And actually, the radiation was 150-mile radius.
Oh,
And
God.
if where the Padilla Ranch is 13 miles away, you can see how they're going to be affected. And Jose was really upset because his mother, when she opened the door, she was getting the father ready, making his lunch to go out to work. She hears this sound, and you'll see in the movie, oh, it's incredible. And she opens the door and she said she saw the light of 1,000 suns. And it was like daylight. Of course, she was blinded in one eye, and Jose lost his eardrum from the sound. Remy's bed went from one side of the room to the other. They were all affected. And years later, when they had their meeting, they were told it was the explosion of an ammunition dump.
That's unacceptable. And this happened 1 month. The UFO encounter happened 1 month after this explosion, didn't it? So
yeah, it was August 18th, and the two boys were out there, looking for a cow that had calved. They were fixing fences because in those days, those little kids even drove at a very early age. All the men were in World War II. They were fighting. And so these boys watched this. And what's amazing, I hope your readers or listeners, I'm sorry, understand when they saw the craft, there had been no Kenneth Arnold. There had been no flying saucers. The word wasn't invented yet. There was no Roswell. There was nothing they could relate to when they saw the avocado-shaped craft. And I don't think the boys or the Army that took a week to clean it up could relate to it either. I mean, if there's nothing in the media, in your life, in magazines, in anything that has anything to do with extraterrestrial craft today, it's part of our culture, but you don't know what you're looking at.
I'm thinking, just for the people watching and listening, maybe we should summarize what Remy and Jose saw, because we know that a ship crash landed at the Trinity site or thereabouts. And I think that you described, or when you interviewed them, they described the aliens as looking like fire ants standing up.
Yeah, or little children. They call them homocitos, little men, little children. They were about the same size as Remy and Jose, so they didn't know what they were. They just knew that one of the panels of the craft had blown out, and they both told the same story. By the way, they moved away from each other. Remy was up in Gig Harbor, Washington, and Jose was in California, and they hadn't seen each other in 60 years. They had the exact same story, and they hadn't seen each other in 60 years. They didn't talk about it because Jose had taken something that didn't belong to him, and he's not going to talk about it. So the thing is, with what they saw were these creatures that, because of the eyes, I think what struck them was the eyes and the long spindly arms. The only thing they could call them were capamocha or fire ant type, because their arms were so long. However, the sounds they were emitting, Jose told me, and he said he'll never forget it, were like a crying baby. He wanted to go in and help them. He didn't know about UFOs or ETs or anything. In 1945, it wasn't even in the lexicon or anywhere.
Right.
So
this was before Roswell.
Help them, and of course, Remy, because there was so much smoke, and some of the mesquite was on fire. Their eyes were burning. They were pretty close to the craft. They could see the three beings. He called it sashaying, but he meant floating back and forth. And of course, Remy, who was the smaller child, started to cry, so Jose didn't go. But he keeps saying to me to this day, Paula, if I had gone in there to help them, I wouldn't be here to talk to you today.
So Jose and Remy kept a part of the craft that they called Tesoro. And I don't think that's ever happened in the history of ufology, that anyone's kept an artifact like that. Do we know whatever happened to that bracket or panel that he removed with his crowbar?
Gave it to me. After 5 years, Remy died in 2013. Thank God I went to Gig Harbor, Washington. I sent Swiss Television over there to film him. I sent Jaime Maussan to film him. I sent James Fox to film Remy when he was alive because I wanted the testimony. After that, when we started working on location with Jose, and we have a lot of film footage of the location because you can actually see the mark of the UFO. It was 30 feet in diameter. Nothing grew there. So the thing is that when that happened, Jose gave me the bracket. He said, because he calls it the bracket or the piece, it was mounted on a square piece of metal. And it was, and the metal had two circles, a copper circle and a silver circle. And what was in the middle was spinning. So he took this piece off on the last day when there were no guards because they wanted a souvenir. And that's the thinking. I want a souvenir. We've been watching. They had secretly watched the cleanup for a week and one that nobody was there. They wanted some piece of it. And that was what they took from the wall. Now, did the Army notice? Yes. They went to the father and they said, did your children take anything? Because we have an inventory here. We don't know what that was. It spun on a silver and copper circle against a plaque. It was the only thing inside. There were no chairs. It was seamless inside. It did have, he said, a clear dome that he could see, a little clear dome that one man could go up and see out of. And it was avocado shaped, so it wasn't a flying saucer. Do we know anything else? No, but we do know this, and I have to tell you this. Since Remy worked for Dixie Lee, the governor of Washington State, she was the head of the Atomic Energy Commission. So if it was right after a month after, that file would be in the Atomic Energy Commission files, not in Blue Book. There was no Air Force. The Army Air Force was together. It's not going to be in their files. So the problem is that the Atomic Energy Commission files are so secret that the president can't even get there. And if you read the book, Jacques did such a meticulous job of researching that. So since Dixie Lee was the governor of Washington State, she and Remy helped get her elected. He had a Hispanic group, so he helped get her elected. She let him see his file, and he told me it was in the Atomic Energy Commission file. She just opened it and she closed it. So people say, where's the file on this? First of all, there aren't files on everything, but what do you do if it's 1 month after the atomic bomb? Where do you put it? Where do you put this case? Where can you, logically. So that's where it went.
I know that the Atomic Energy Commission was headed by Louis Strauss, which was played by the actor Robert Downey Jr. in the movie. And if you recall, he's the one that went after Oppenheimer and discredited him. So I'm sure he didn't have the ethics to reveal something like a UFO event, especially the first time ever.
Well, all I can tell you is it's all related because I was, the journalist brought Colonel Corso to Italy because Corso didn't speak very much in the United States. And when he was in Italy, he told me that he briefed Bobby Kennedy on UFOs. So he's briefing Kennedy because when Corso got the artifacts from Roswell, it was 1960. It was in the 60s. So, and Corso said it was just the Army because he said it was to have, to get up on the competitive edge of Army contracts. So the Air Force probably had stuff. But if Corso is talking to Bobby Kennedy about UFOs and Corso's back engineering with General Trudeau, you bet your life that Kennedy knew about UFOs.
Just for our listeners and our audience, Colonel Corso co-wrote the book The Day After Roswell. He also wrote an excellent book, which I read also, continuation of that book, which I have here.
they mean connecting the dots, making sense of the UFO.
Colonel Corso, a personal memoir.
Yeah, that was, yeah, he's in connecting the dots too, but the conversations he get with him, when I would talk to him, my feeling was, I'm not going to remember this, and I don't want to make mistakes. One of the things as a journalist, and I'm not a ufologist, I'm an investigative journalist, is can't make mistakes on what people tell me, right there. So I don't remember dates, and so forth. So everything was on audio. So when he would talk to me, I took all the audio and I put it in the book, Conversations with Colonel Corso. He was dead set that I would speak after he was gone. He said, Paula, I'm not going to be around very much. Please tell the world. He said, they can handle it. He said, we had the artifacts of Roswell. I briefed Bobby Kennedy. He said, remember when he said he's talking about the Army, because each branch, I think, has its own responsibility and its own, involvement in UFOs. I don't know if people know, but the Navy is really in charge of UFOs. Most of NASA were Navy pilots. So the thing is that I've had to put together all this, but when I do it, it has to come from the source. It can't come from somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. It can't come from rumors. It has to come from people that actually were there, that worked on it. So with Trinity, we got 2 more witnesses who were actually there and touched the artifacts. What we call angel hair. I don't want to call it fiber optics because it was too thin. I don't know what it was that they
used it for their Christmas tree decorations.
There was no electricity. This stuff was all lit up. It was all lit up all the time, but it was also harmful. I mean, Sabrina told me that it pinched her hands.
Right.
And Faustino said that he used to play tricks on people by putting it in their back at school. I mean, it's like, this is so crazy. I'm sitting there going, see, I spend a lot of my time going, this is crazy. This is
they
real.
were so innocent back then. You also went back and you interviewed Jose Padilla's niece, Sabrina, and she's the only member that handled all 4 materials. That speaks a lot about your integrity. You're the only person that writes books on UFOs that gets so involved and goes in and does the field work and talks with the people. And for all my listeners, you can believe that if Paola writes a book, it's straight from the witness's mouth. She doesn't ad lib. She doesn't interpret. That's the great thing about Paola. She tells it like it is, and she gets in there and she gets a true story. I'm a big fan, Paola. I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
And one of the reasons is I don't know what's going on. I can't tell you everything. I can just tell you what happened, and then you have to decide. It's for me. I'm shocked every time I talk to somebody because, and by the way, after 40 years, after working with JL and Hynek for 6 years, I can tell the difference of people that want to make money and have their own show or want something. I can tell the difference and are lying. But in this case, you have to understand that these guys, Remy and Jose, didn't see each other for 60 years. They only got together because Jose's son was doing genealogy and found out where Remy was. And then they said, do you remember what happened? And they go, yeah, do you remember what happened? And then if you want to go on a metaphysical level, I love the idea of working on consciousness and metaphysics. Whoever crashed knew that Jacques and I were going to write this book. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been worth crashing. Do you understand that? And that I hate to use crash because they were there. And the next day they weren't there because when the father went in, they weren't there. They couldn't even find the craft the next day because that had been covered by brush. The Army, Air Force had gone in there and put stuff all over it. But it's like, it shocks me because the same with Colonel Corso. I could have never done that story. I was living in Italy, and I didn't even want to go to the 50th anniversary of Roswell. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to cover it. I didn't know what he looked like. And I end up in the room next to him in the hotel when nobody can get to him.
That was
Now,
such a weird coincidence. Yeah.
I'm going, that's impossible. That because that everything was booked. Everything. It was the 50th anniversary. Everybody in the world was there. And there was only one room for 3 days, and it was the one next to him.
But you got so
And
much more information from Colonel Corso than was in the original book. That's why I'm recommending Conversations with Colonel Corso. I didn't know that he was a contactee, that he had gone back to Trinity and had a contact experience. And I wouldn't have
you want to
known
hear
that.
he did, the bad thing was when I went in to get the interview, at that time, my mind I couldn't wrap around, what was inside the craft. I didn't want to talk about aliens. I wanted to talk about the incident. I did not. And he started with the incident at White Sands where the being came out of the cave. And he started telling me about that. And my mind goes, I'm not printing this because this is going to make you look crazy.
Yeah.
I not print this. I'm going, and he wrote on a napkin, "A new world if you can take it." And then he said, "Paula, what do you think that means?" And I said, "I don't even want to know. Can you just tell me about what you did in the Pentagon? Because if I do a story on you, it has to be credible." So you can see how much I've evolved since 1999, 1997 when I met Corso. Because I swore I was never going to write that. I mean, but I've evolved a lot. I've got to open my mind just like everybody else. I knew John Mack very well, and he said to me, Dr. John Mack, the Harvard University psychiatrist who wrote Passport to the Cosmos, and he sat me down and he said, look, he said, you're going to have to change your worldview to accommodate this. I know it's uncomfortable, but it's a reality. So, we just all have to change our worldview. I mean, we can't change, and it can't be shoved into a box of science because there's no science that can explain it. It needs to be looked at with serious dialogue. And I'm going to end by saying a lot of my work is outside the United States right now because unfortunately, a lot of what I did in the States seems to be entertainment. And for me, it's darn serious. So I have to go where there's serious dialogue. I just did a show out of Japan, and I feel so bad because if you read our book, Trinity, the emperor had already resigned or capitulated.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever seen Jacques really get emotional when he talks about this. And we went and we threw the bombs anyway.
Yeah, it's really sad how many people were killed there. And I know that you've been one of the persons that has been long clearing the way for disclosure, and that you were at the 2001 press club event with Dr. Greer. I recently covered his latest press club event this past June in my audio podcast. What's your opinion? I mean, considering how the government treated the locals in Los Alamos, didn't give them a heads up before attempting that explosion, that they had no idea whether it even end the whole world, because at one point in the movie, they were not sure whether the bomb would have a chemical reaction that would continue and the whole atmosphere would just fire up and explode. They had no idea what would happen. They didn't give them the heads up. So what's your opinion about disclosure? Do you think that the government is ever capable of coming clean about the UFO phenomenon? I mean, we have a subcommittee hearing just tomorrow, Wednesday, in Washington about it. Seems to be ramping up. Dr. Greer's work seems to have some effect. I'm just wondering what your take on this is, because you're sort of an insider. And what do you think, Paola?
Well, first of all, I support Dr. Stephen Greer as one of the only people who is really serious about this, because his 10 witnesses, we just have one coming out of just recently, and they tend to be media stars. And the 10 witnesses you watched that were so emotional. and wanted just to tell the truth for
I
Dr.
agree.
Greer. I did the work in the 2001 with all the pilots in Italy, and we got so much for him in the 2000 disclosure, and he wants a result of free energy. So that is the key to everything. If the world were to get off the petrodollar and use the technology, that is the key. If you have an intelligent mind, and you know that's where he's going there, that is very dangerous in a world that is not only at war, we're in a cold war. My opinion, and you said, what is your opinion, is there's no reason for the government to have disclosure. Why would they do that when they kept the secret all this long? And it's deep black. Just listen to Richard Dolan's research. Why in the world would you come and tell the people, number one, you lie, number one, we have the technology to save the world and save the starving populations, we just decided not to use it. One of the things that Colonel Corso taught me, this might help you, is there's no such thing as the government. It changes every 4 years. So it must be the micromanagers of the secret. And it wouldn't be the government. It's not the president. I mean, Kennedy knew. I think Clinton even knew, but it's not the president. It's not the people we elect. There is a group that is managing this. And I don't feel, opinion wise, it is to their benefit to disclose everything, anything. They can give you bits and pieces, but if there is that, then there's an agenda behind it, like getting more weapons of war to shoot at the aliens, or some kind of war appropriations, because this planet lives on war economy. So I don't think they want to go to the coffee table at Starbucks with the beings, and we don't even know who they are or what's going on. If we don't know what's going on, and we've been working at it for a long time, I don't think that a group of people that changes every 4 years or more, like Colonel Corso said, stop using the word government. I think it's more a select group that manages the information. And it could be a distraction.
Yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to bring up, disinformation. And how do we know who the disinformants are? And one of the things you talk about in your book, and I seem to agree with, I'm not as knowledgeable as you are, Paola, but within the UFO community itself, we just can't seem to get it together. I mean, if we work together, I mean, if everybody worked together, the military as well, we could finally come to terms with extraterrestrial life and use this 0 point energy and benefit everybody. I mean, poverty, pollution could be ended. I'm sure that you're well aware of Dr. Greer's platform on all those subjects. So when you say in connecting the dots and in Stargate to the new reality, that we have to look more at the spiritual message contained in the whole ET experience, I can relate to that, because the military is all about just weaponizing whatever technology that they might have. I mean, we're talking about metamaterials. Your book, Trinity, has a lot to do with metamaterials that were retrieved by these two young boys. Was the person in the picture you sent me, was that Jose Padilla with you and Jacques Vallée, the picture you sent me?
And yeah, that he's getting so old. He's 86.
Maybe I can put that up. I'm going to try and put that up for our audience.
Yeah, because that's April. So, what happens is that we're down there. He's sitting next to Jacques. We're down there last April. We are trying to hold his hand and keep him alive so that something will happen, so the people will understand what's going on.
How old did you say he is now?
86.
86?
Yeah, and but also Jacques is not is getting.
He's at least 83, right?
He's 83 or 84. Yeah,
he looks great though. Yeah. So do you, by the way. I'm not saying anything about your age, but you look great too.
I'm 78, so I want people to understand that this was one of the best and maybe last major cases I'm going to work on, because when I was doing the show out of Japan, I want to do it on consciousness raising. And what I believe, and this may help you to understand, is that all of the sightings and everything that's happened is to get our attention. So whoever it is, and I was very close to Clifford Stone, who died last February, and he told me he did 12 crash retrievals. He told me he had a manual, he said, with 57 different races. So we got to stop speaking about Greys, Nordics, and reptilians. If there's 57
Wow.
different races in Virginia, it doesn't even fit in there. Stop being narrow-minded.
Right.
One of the things our field is they don't study everybody else's book. They just read their own. There's no money in the field, so everybody thinks they have to hold on to their own stuff instead of having a dialogue. Everything I have done with the last 10 years has been out of my pocket. I can't even tell you the thousands of dollars, including the last April, that we've all spent on field research. The only kind of research I can do is field research. I got to go to the place. When I had Clark McClellan down in NASA. I had to go to where he worked. I had to go to what he did. I had to see. I did the Charles Hall case. I took him to Indian Springs. I had to have him repeat to me how he lived and everything. That takes money, and nobody does that except Timothy.
No, I don't know how you do it.
Because I don't go on vacation. I don't do anything else. I have to. My job as journalist is to bring the actual story from the actual person, and you make up your mind. But how can I do that on a phone? Or how can I do that when somebody just talks to me? I have so much research. And because of my age, again, I said I was 78, most of my research just went to Rice University in about 10 boxes, along with Jacques Vallée's and Whitley Strieber's. The research is there for students because they will not just read their own book. They will do, academic research, which unfortunately my colleagues don't do. They don't read anybody's book. I mean, we sent Trinity to some top level researchers who haven't read it. And a lot of criticism that is unfounded because they haven't read it. I'm thinking, whenever I'm a teacher, I have a master's degree in education. I can't discuss Steinbeck unless you read the book Mice and Men. What am I discussing? And that is our problem with our colleagues. They see a brand new book. There's a lot of jealousy in the field. It's awful. And I feel like saying, can you read the book and we sit down and we talk about your research and you talk about our research and we can all get together? Like the United Nations or any other group. It is unheard of in the US. I just came from Mexico City, and it is completely different in Latin America. So I have decided I will be working in Latin America and Asia. And I was just in Paris and just did a show on Paris television that was an intelligent exchange. I can only do that, but you mentioned spirituality. I realize if I'm in this because I'm supposed to do the information stuff, then I better grow up too. And I better look at what this all means for the planet. And what Oppenheimer did for me was shock me right out of my little human form. It shocked me so much about our responsibility to what we just did.
It's too bad the way that the government used him for his genius and then discredited him when he became remorseful. I know that spirituality is a big topic, and a lot of the authors that I've interviewed have evolved into that as well. I'm wondering whether we can connect with the extraterrestrials on that level better than we can on a physical level. And maybe that's why we haven't made contact yet, because we haven't evolved spiritually yet. And I also wanted to follow up by asking you why you think that they take this seriously overseas, whereas here we're just starting to break the ice in terms of it not being a stigma to even discuss it. Why, for
Well,
example, Corso was
it
greeted with open arms in Italy. Here, he was banned from talking about anything.
there was a lot of jealousy with Corso because it was the day after Roswell, and two of his great, and I'm not going to name them, two of his greatest detractors were from our people. If you read the introduction that Michael Sala wrote, he names them who crucified Corso. And one of these people was in San Marino with me. I was under Corso's arm. I was holding his arm because he's 82 years old, a man. And I was standing there, and there was a champagne reception for him. And one of these guys that's very famous came up and said, "You have ruined ufology for all of us." And Corso looked at him and said, "Were you at the Pentagon? Were you there? Did you work on these programs?" And that particular personality went and discredited Corso and Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister with whom I was very close. And that's our own eating our own. And instead of sitting down and saying, because in the book that you just showed is all Corso's records. He was at Fort Riley, Kansas in 1947. He was in Germany. He was the head of intelligence in Italy. We got all of his, there was nothing about Colonel Corso except the jealousy around his book. Because that was the first time at the 50th anniversary, people understood why the secret was secret, that it was about the technology, not about, the world going into panic over aliens, or it was economic. So I didn't understand that because I was wondering, why can't we just talk about this, but I realized from Corso, when you touch economics, when you touch the black programs, when you touch the technology exchange, when you touch what Stephen Greer is 100% right about. And by the way, the people he names, I talked to them. I know he's telling the truth. Stephen Greer is taking this on, but it's very, very dangerous because he names companies, he names people. I know he's telling the truth. I was in Europe during that time, and it's so complicated. But then Stephen Greer says, and I'm going to remind everybody, if you want to connect, you can connect with the heart. That's why I love the Latin American people. They connect with the heart. They don't connect with the head. How can you connect with the brain to a civilization that's so evolved? You can't even go there, but you can connect with a heart connection to these cosmic cultures. And Stephen with CE5 has crafted a way that the average person, if they calm their mind and have a pure intent, can connect. So let me just say, if that's the last part of this interview, I'll be really happy because I have all the data. I have 40 years of data. My God, I've interviewed everybody in the world, you name them. All the remote viewers. In my book, Connecting the Dots, I go from Uri Geller to all the remote viewers, to the astronauts, to Edgar Mitchell, who was a friend of mine, to Hynek, to everybody. I got the data. What the big thing is what does it mean? Why? What do you want to do with it? Now that you have the information, what do you want to do with it? Because it does affect your life. Again, I believe those beings at Trinity knew Jacques and I were going to write a book. And the interesting part is they knew the movie Trinity was going to come out too. They know time. They know what the effect of what they do is. A lot of the contactees in Latin America are time travelers, and they're telling us what the future timeline is. There is no time, so then you have to grasp that concept. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about it in my old age.
Well, you don't look old, let me tell you. You look 50. But that was such a excellent way of wrapping it up. And I enjoy the fact that you don't try and create a narrative like some other ufologists. You just say it like it is. You present the facts, and you let the reader or the person taking in the or absorbing the information decide for themselves. And that's a scientific approach. You're just being objective about it. You're showing the evidence and then allowing the American public or the public at large to decide. Do you have anything going on now that you'd like to let my audience know about? I know that you have a very busy schedule, and I'm very thankful that you were able to fit me in. And you have something going on at Shag Harbor in September, don't you?
I'm speaking there on a UFO on Trinity, but there was a crash there, and of course that's in Canada. What I'd like to do is, I did a show out of Japan. I really want to talk about consciousness raising and how, even though this is all real, it's not entertainment. This is not like, let's just be entertained. This is an effort to connect to the cosmos so that the human species doesn't remain in the Cold War, because we're back in the Cold War. I'm looking for the off ramp for this Russian Ukraine thing. How can we get out of this? I mean, we were in this in 1963, and got out of it with perestroika and Gorbachev. And one thing I want to encourage your viewers: when you look at the history of UFOs and know that chronologically UFO sightings and contact, like the early days of Giant Rock in 1950s, where Giant Rock with Menger, Adamski, Van Tassel, and all that was coinciding with Yogananda and the New Age movement. That there has been efforts to shift us out of our primitive species thinking into a more cosmic, and that means the end of separation. We cannot all separate and then we all kill each other. That is not the way this should go. So for me, I get more done if I will go into consciousness realm. And you can ask me data. I mean, it's in my DNA. Everything I've done, I remember. I remember the dates. I remember what I did. But that doesn't change anything. We need to change something.
Glad you're speaking out the way that you are. I know that Americans tend to think of technology and they see the whole UFO situation as almost comical or entertainment. But I think that going back to your book, Trinity, the reason why they've been visiting us might be because of the nuclear explosions that might have caught their attention. And they're probably concerned about us, about what we're doing to the atmosphere, to perhaps other dimensions. And I'm glad that people like you speak out and that we can get this out to the public. It's more of a serious matter than people realize. I want people to know that you have a new version of Connecting the Dots, which has a bunch of interviews, compilation, and an expansion of almost everyone you've interviewed. There's also another excellent book, Stargate to New Reality, that everyone should go out and get. Of course, Trinity, the best kept secret, has a new expanded version. You guys have to get the full story. And of course, Conversations with Colonel Corso, which is a very thin book, but very intimate. And Paola, you can attest to this. You had very great conversations with him and got information from him that probably doesn't appear anywhere. I want to also remind the public that Paola will be appearing in the Shag Harbor UFO Expo September the 30th and October the 1st in Nova Scotia in Canada. And December, you're in Mexico City. You get around.
Unfortunately, I had to cancel out of that, but
okay.
I would like to tell them that I have accepted to go to Japan in 2024 and do a lecture. I really think that ufology is not just American. I was just in Paris and I was on TV, but the thing is this, that I want to encourage your viewers, your listeners, to do their own research and read, because getting stuff off YouTube is not anything a teacher like me would give credit for. In other words, YouTube is not, go to the source. If you want to know about Colonel Corso, go to his book. You want to know about Albert Einstein, read his book. You know, the thing is that I want to encourage people to take this seriously as a study. And I will come to a serious conference where there will be dialogue. I'm not a t-shirt or tinfoil type person. I can't play that. You know, I can't play the entertainment part of ufology after having spoken to all these heroes. Too many heroes, too many. Monsignor Balducci of the Vatican, who was very close to me. Too many heroes, I can't name them. Please study this seriously.
Thank you, Paola. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on. Perhaps we can do this again because there's so much more that I haven't covered that I would love to talk to you about. All the best luck and good fortune for you in the future. And Japan, I know that they love you there and they love you in China as well. Folks, this is a world-renowned investigative journalist, Paola Harris. Be sure to pick up her books. They're well worth reading. Thanks again, Paola.
Let's have another conversation soon because there's just so much information.
It's true. And you keep writing.
Well, you know, what can I say? I'm a teacher. And that's how I used to get a degree, is by reading books. So, you know, it's a pleasure being with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to actually speak with the person that I've enjoyed your books so often and reread them. And I'm looking forward to your next book. And thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you.